They expected a scream. They expected begging. They certainly expected tears. But when Clara signed the divorce papers ending her 10-year marriage to New York real estate mogul Marcus Sterling, the room went dead silent. She didn't ask for alimony. She didn't fight for the penthouse on Park Avenue. She didn't even look at the woman sitting in the corner, the younger, blonder secretary waiting to take her place. Clara simply capped her pen, slid the papers across the mahogany table, and walked out the door. Marcus laughed, thinking he had won the ultimate victory. He thought she was leaving with nothing. He had no idea that the man waiting for her downstairs wasn't just a driver. He was the one man Marcus had feared his entire life. And Clara. She wasn't the victim. She was the architect of his upcoming destruction. The rain on Fifth Avenue didn't just fall. It felt like it was hammering against the city, trying to wash away the grime of Manhattan. Inside the climate-controlled, glass-walled conference room of Sterling and Partners, the atmosphere was even colder. Marcus Sterling checked his Rolex, a platinum Daytona that cost more than most people's college tuition. He sighed loudly, a theatrical sound meant to convey that his time was far too valuable for this. "Are we done yet?" he asked, not looking at his wife but at his lawyer, a shark of a man named Arthur Pendergast. Sitting across from him was Clara Thorne, formerly Clara Sterling. She wore a simple beige trench coat over a black dress. Her hands were folded in her lap. She wore no jewelry. The massive diamond ring Marcus had given her 10 years ago, mostly to show off to his golf buddies, was already sitting on the table, a cold, sparkling rock that meant nothing. "Just one more signature, Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said, his voice dripping with that fake sympathy lawyers use right before they skin you alive. "Clause 14B, confirming that you waive all rights to the Sterling Family Trust and the Hamptons estate." Marcus smirked. He leaned back in his leather chair, shooting a glance at the corner of the room. Sitting there, pretending to check emails on an iPad, was Isabella. She was 24, gorgeous, and currently wearing a bracelet Clara had noticed missing from her jewelry box 2 months ago. Marcus didn't even have the decency to hide her. He wanted Clara to see. He wanted Clara to break. He wanted the scene. He wanted her to scream, "How could you?" so he could calmly reply, "I outgrew you, Clara. Look at yourself." But Clara didn't look at Isabella. She didn't look at Marcus. She picked up the pen. The scratch of the ink against the paper was the loudest sound in the room. "Clara Thorne." She set the pen down. "Excellent," Arthur said, scooping up the papers as if afraid she might change her mind. "That concludes the dissolution. Mr. Sterling will arrange for a car to take you to—" He paused, checking his notes. "Where are you staying, actually?" Marcus let out a short, cruel laugh. "Probably her mother's old place in Queens? Or did you find a shelter that takes strays, Clara?" Clara stood up. The movement was fluid, graceful. She smoothed the front of her coat. She picked up her small leather handbag, and then she finally looked at him. Her eyes weren't red. They weren't angry. They were terrifyingly empty. It was the look of someone who was looking at a stranger, or worse, an object. She turned to the door. "Clara!" Marcus barked, his ego bruised by her lack of reaction. "I'm talking to you. Don't walk away from me. You're walking out of here with nothing. You understand that I made you. I bought the clothes on your back. Without me, you are zero." She paused with her hand on the brass doorknob. For a second, the room held its breath. Isabella looked up from her iPad, eyes wide, waiting for the explosion. Clara simply turned the knob and walked out. "Let her go," Marcus sneered, though his heart was hammering with a strange, unfamiliar anxiety. "She'll be back begging for a check by next week." Clara walked through the lobby of the Sterling building. The security guard, an older man named Henry, tipped his hat to her. "Taxi Mrs. Sterling," Henry asked kindly. He knew. Everyone in the building knew. Clara smiled at him, a genuine, warm smile that Marcus hadn't seen in 5 years. "No, thank you, Henry. My ride is here." She pushed through the revolving doors and stepped onto the sidewalk. The rain was torrential now. Marcus, unable to help himself, had walked to the floor-to-ceiling window of the conference room on the 40th floor. He looked down. He wanted to see her struggle with an umbrella, to see her drenched and miserable hailing a yellow cab. "Look at her," Marcus said to Isabella, who had sidled up beside him. "Pathetic. She doesn't even have an umbrella." But then traffic on Fifth Avenue seemed to part. A car was gliding toward the curb. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. But not just any Phantom. It was the extended wheelbase model, painted a deep midnight blue that looked black under the city lights. It had diplomatic flags on the fender. Marcus frowned. "Who is that?" The car stopped exactly in front of Clara. The back door didn't pop open automatically. Instead, the driver got out. He was a mountain of a man with an earpiece holding a massive black umbrella. He didn't just open the door. He bowed slightly. But Clara didn't get in immediately. The rear window rolled down. From the 40th floor, Marcus couldn't see the face inside. But he saw a hand reach out, a hand wearing a distinct signet ring, and take Clara's hand. Then the door opened fully. A man stepped out to greet her. Marcus pressed his face against the glass, his breath fogging it up. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." The man on the street was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Marcus's car. He had silver fox hair and a posture that screamed old money. He didn't shake Clara's hand. He took her face in his hands and kissed her forehead gently, a gesture of immense familiarity and protection. It was Alistair Vance. Marcus stumbled back from the window as if he'd been shot. "What is it?" Isabella asked, looking at his pale face. "Who is that Alistair Vance?" Marcus choked out. "The CEO of Vance Global. The man who tried to buy my company 3 times. Why is he picking up your ex-wife?" Marcus watched as Alistair held the umbrella for Clara, guiding her into the plush leather interior of the Rolls-Royce like she was a queen returning from exile. The car pulled away, disappearing into the sea of red taillights. Marcus felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. Clara was a nobody, a girl from the suburbs he had rescued from a mid-level accounting job. She didn't know people like Alistair Vance. Alistair Vance was royalty in the business world. He didn't associate with commoners. Unless... Marcus looked at the empty table where the divorce papers lay. He replayed the last 10 years in his head. The quiet dinners where she listened to him complain about business. The nights she stayed up late, organizing his files. The way she never ever talked about her life before him. "She didn't say a word," Marcus whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "She didn't argue. She just signed." He grabbed his phone and dialed his head of security. "Johnson," Marcus barked, his voice trembling. "I want a full background check on Clara. Not the one we did when we got married. Dig deeper. Go back to before she met me. I want to know everything." "Mr. Sterling, we did a check 10 years ago. She's clean. Parents deceased, community college degree." "Do it again," Marcus screamed, throwing a crystal tumbler against the wall. It shattered, sending shards of glass skittering toward Isabella's Louboutin heels. "Because I have a feeling I just handed my company's playbook to the enemy." Inside the Rolls-Royce. The silence inside the car was different. It was warm. It smelled of aged leather and cedarwood. Clara leaned her head back against the headrest and closed her eyes, letting out a breath she felt she had been holding for a decade. "Is it done?" Alistair asked softly. His voice was deep, a rumble of thunder wrapped in velvet. "It's done," Clara said. She opened her eyes and looked at him. "He thinks he won Alistair. He thinks he stripped me of everything." Alistair reached into the built-in cooler and pulled out a bottle of chilled mineral water, her favorite brand, sourced from a spring in the Swiss Alps. He unscrewed the cap and handed it to her. "Marcus Sterling has always been a man who looks at the price tag and never the value," Alistair said. "He never understood who you were. He never asked." "He never asked because he didn't care," Clara corrected. She took a sip of the water. He fell in love with a reflection of himself in my eyes. The moment I stopped reflecting it, I became useless to him. Alistair smiled a sharp, dangerous expression that the business world feared. Well, Clara Thorne is officially dead. The poor housewife from Queens is gone. He pressed a button on the console and a partition slid up, separating them completely from the driver. Are you ready to go home, Lady Clara? Clara looked out the window at the passing city, the city she had helped Marcus conquer, silently fixing his mistakes, rewriting his proposals, whispering strategies in his ear that he claimed as his own. Not yet, Clara said, her eyes hardening. First we have a stop to make. Oh, the bank, Clara said. The safety deposit box under the name Doe, the one I opened the week before the wedding. Alistair raised an eyebrow. What's in there? Insurance, Clara whispered, and the deed to the land Sterling and Partners is built on. Alistair threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure delight. You didn't. He forgot to renew the ground lease 5 years ago, Clara said calmly. He was too busy with his first affair. I bought it through a shell company. Technically, as of this morning, Marcus is trespassing on my property. The Rolls-Royce turned a corner heading toward the financial district. The game had begun, and Marcus Sterling didn't even know he was already in checkmate. 3 days after the divorce was finalized, Marcus Sterling threw a party. It wasn't officially a divorce party that would be tacky even for him, but everyone at the Obsidian Club knew exactly what they were celebrating. The Obsidian was one of those places in Manhattan where the air conditioning smelled like oud wood, and the membership fee cost more than a Porsche. Marcus stood by the fireplace, swirling a glass of 50-year-old Macallan holding court. She wanted a quiet exit. Marcus told a small circle of his sycophants, younger brokers who wanted to be him and older investors who wanted his returns. I respected that. You know me. I'm a generous man. I offered her the beach house, but she has her pride. You're a St. Marcus, Isabella cooed, hanging on his arm. She was wearing a red dress that was far too bright for the somber old money atmosphere of the club. Most men would have dragged it out in court. It's about efficiency, Marcus said, tapping his temple. Cut the dead weight. Sterling and Partners is entering a new era. We have the Midtown Tower project breaking ground next month. No distractions. A hush fell over the group as a man approached. It was Julian Banks, the editor of the Manhattan Chronicle's business section. He wasn't a sycophant. He was a shark who smelled blood. Marcus, Julian said, declining the drink offered to him. Interesting narrative, but I'm hearing rumors about your ex-wife's departure. Marcus stiffened. Rumors? My sources say she was picked up by Alistair Vance. Julian said, his voice low but carrying clearly in the quiet room. In a car with diplomatic plates. Care to explain how a simple housewife from Queens knows the most reclusive billionaire in Europe? Marcus forced a laugh. It sounded like glass crunching in a disposal. Alistair, please. It was probably a rideshare service he owns. Or maybe she's working as a nanny for his staff. Clara is resourceful in domestic matters. The crowd chuckled nervously, but the air had shifted. The name Vance carried weight. Alistair Vance didn't hire nannies personally. He didn't run ride shares. If Alistair Vance showed up, nations were usually changing currency policies. Marcus excused himself, his hand gripping Isabella's arm tightly. He needed air. He stepped out onto the terrace overlooking Central Park. The flashback 10 years ago. The cold night air triggered a memory Marcus had suppressed for years. He remembered the day he met Clara. He wasn't a mogul then. He was 30 years old, sweating through a cheap suit, sitting in the back of a cramped office in Brooklyn. He was about to lose everything. He had over-leveraged on a brownstone renovation that had gone wrong. Structural issues mulled union strikes. The bank was calling his loan in 24 hours. Clara wasn't his accountant then. She was a temp, a quiet girl in an oversized cardigan who answered the phones and made coffee. He had been shouting at his contractor on the phone, slamming the receiver down. I'm done, he had muttered, head in his hands. I'm bankrupt. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Clara. Mr. Sterling, she had said, her voice barely a whisper. I accidentally saw the ledger on your desk. Not now, Clara, he snapped. You're trying to refinance the construction loan, she said quickly. But you can't because the equity isn't there. But I looked at the zoning laws for that block. The city just passed the air rights transfer bill yesterday. Marcus looked up. What? The church next door to your building, Clara explained, pulling a crumpled napkin out of her pocket covered in complex mathematical formulas. They aren't using their vertical space. If you buy their air rights for pennies because they need cash for a roof repair, you can increase the valuation of your property by 40%, based on potential square footage. The bank will extend the loan based on the new valuation. Marcus stared at her. It was brilliant. It was obscure. It was a loophole only a genius or a seasoned real estate attorney would see. How do you know this? He asked. She shrugged, looking down at her shoes. I read a lot. They did the deal. It worked. Marcus made his first $1 million. He took Clara out to dinner to celebrate, and he talked about his vision, his gut instinct. He never asked her where she learned about air rights transfers. He just hired her. Over the next decade, the pattern repeated. The Dubai deal. Clara spoke fluent Arabic, he never asked why, and charmed the sheikh's mother while Marcus fumbled with the contract. The tax audit of 2018, Clara produced a box of documents that exonerated them completely, utilizing offshore trusts in the Caymans that Marcus didn't even know existed. He convinced himself she was just a great assistant, then a great wife. He never let himself think she was the engine. Because if she was the engine, what was he? Back to the present. On the terrace, Marcus shook the memory away. She was a temp, he whispered to the wind. She's nothing. Marcus? Isabella touched his shoulder. Your phone is buzzing. He looked down. It was Arthur, his lawyer. This better be good, Arthur. I'm at the club. Marcus, you need to get to the office. Arthur's voice was trembling. Now. It's 9:00 p.m. on a Friday. Marcus, the servers are wiping. Someone initiated a remote purge code. Stop it, Marcus screamed. Who has the authorization to do that? Only I have the master key. The log says the command was authorized by Admin 0, Arthur said. Marcus, who is Admin 0? Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Admin 0. It was the default username Clara had set up when she built their digital infrastructure years ago. He had never changed it because he didn't know how. I'm coming, Marcus said. He didn't know it yet, but the Nothing Woman was about to dismantle his life brick by golden brick. Saturday morning broke with a gray, oppressive fog over Manhattan. By the time Marcus stormed into the Sterling and Partners headquarters on Wall Street, the damage was already catastrophic. The IT department was in chaos. Monitors were flashing blue error screens. The junior analysts were sitting around looking terrified. Report, Marcus barked, storming into the server room. His chief technology officer, a man named David, who usually looked smug, was currently sweating through his shirt. It's not a hack, sir, David said, his fingers flying across a keyboard that wasn't responding. It's a license revocation. Speak English. The software we use for property management, the proprietary algorithm that predicts market trends, even the email encryption keys. They were all licensed to Sterling and Partners by a third-party vendor called Cicero Solutions. I've never heard of Cicero Solutions, Marcus spat. We built that software in-house. That's what the record said, David stammered. But at midnight, Cicero Solutions revoked our user keys due to violation of terms of service. The violation listed is change of management control. Marcus froze. Cicero. Clara loved Roman history. She used to read Cicero's speeches to him in bed to help him sleep. Get me the contact info for this Cicero Solutions, Marcus demanded. David pulled up a file on his tablet. It's a shell company registered in Zurich. The signatory is a law firm, Vance and Associates. Marcus punched a metal filing cabinet, leaving a dent. She locked us out of our own system. Sir, his secretary, a new girl who had replaced Isabella, who was currently consulting, appeared at the door. You have a visitor. It's Senator Holloway. Marcus straightened his tie. This was his chance to stabilize things. Senator Holloway was a key ally. He was the one pushing through the zoning permits for the massive Midtown Tower project, the crown jewel of the Sterling Empire. Send him into my office, and get me coffee. Black. Marcus walked into his plush corner office. Senator Holloway was standing by the window looking at the view. He wasn't smiling. Senator, Marcus said, putting on his best charm offensive. To what do I owe the pleasure on a Saturday? Holloway turned. He was an older man, distinguished with a face carved from granite. He held a manila envelope. The Midtown Tower, Marcus, Holloway said coldly. It's dead. What? We have the permits. We break ground on Tuesday. You had the permits, Holloway corrected. The environmental impact study that allowed you to bypass the wetland restrictions. It was flagged this morning as fraudulent. That's impossible, Marcus said, his stomach dropping. Clara handled that filing personally. She was meticulous. Exactly, Holloway said. She was meticulous, and apparently she kept the original data. She sent a packet to my office this morning. It seems the soil samples you submitted were optimistically adjusted by your previous foreman. Clara's note said she couldn't in good conscience allow a building to be constructed on unstable land now that she is no longer there to supervise the reinforcement protocols. She turned us in, Marcus whispered. She saved my ass, Holloway snapped. If that building went up and sank 2 inches, I'd be in federal prison for approving it. You, however, Holloway tossed the envelope on the desk. The EPA is launching an investigation into all your developments from the last 5 years. Don't call me again, Marcus. The senator walked out. Marcus sank into his leather chair. The silence in the office was deafening. He reached for his private phone to call Isabella, needing someone to tell him he was still powerful. But as he picked it up, he saw a notification from his bank. Alert. Automatic debit. Failed. Insufficient funds. Insufficient funds, Marcus muttered. I have $10 million in the operating account. He logged into the Cayman Islands account, the one Clara had set up for him during the tax audit years ago. The screen loaded. Balance, $0. There was a transaction note. Transfer executed per Joint Custody Clause 14B. Dissolution of marital assets. Clause 14B, Marcus whispered. That was the clause Arthur, his idiot lawyer, had chuckled about, the one Clara had signed without reading. He frantically dug through the trash can where he had thrown a copy of the divorce decree yesterday. He smoothed out the coffee-stained paper. Clause 14B. Both parties agree that any assets held in trusts managed by the Sentinel Group shall be reverted to the original grantor upon dissolution of marriage. Arthur! Marcus screamed, grabbing the office phone. Arthur picked up on the first ring. Marcus, I'm looking at it now. I missed it. You missed that she stole $10 million. She didn't steal it, Marcus. Arthur sounded like he was hyperventilating. Technically, she was the original grantor. The money in the Cayman account. It never came from your business profits. The records show the initial deposit came 10 years ago from a trust called the Thorn Legacy Fund. Marcus dropped the phone. The receiver dangled by its cord, swinging back and forth. The $10 million that had jump-started his empire. He always thought it was a lucky break, a silent investor he never met. Clara told him she had found an angel investor who believed in him. It was her money, all of it. She hadn't just left him. She had repossessed him. The intercom buzzed. It was the receptionist again. Her voice was shaking. Mr. Sterling, there are people here to see you. If it's the press, tell them to go to hell. It's not the press, sir. It's the sheriff's department, and a representative from Vance Global Real Estate. Marcus walked out to the lobby like a man walking to the gallows. Standing there was a deputy holding a piece of paper, and next to him was a woman in a sharp gray suit. She looked efficient and ruthless. "Mr. Sterling," the woman said, "I'm Elena. I'm Ms. Croft, representing the new property owners." "I own this building," Marcus snarled. "I built it. You own the steel and glass," Ms. Croft corrected. "But as you know, the ground lease for the land beneath this building expired 5 days ago. You failed to renew. My client, Mr. Vance, acting on behalf of Ms. Thorne, purchased the land rights this morning." She held up a document. "This is a notice of eviction. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises, or we will begin charging a trespassing fee of $50,000 per hour." Marcus looked around the lobby. His employees were watching. The security guards were watching. The deputy was watching. He realized then that Clara hadn't just left him. She had spent the last 10 years building a cage around him, and he had been too arrogant to hear the lock click shut. Meanwhile, on the Amalfi Coast, the scene was a stark contrast to the gloomy chaos of Wall Street. The sun was setting over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold. A massive superyacht, the Silent Queen, sat anchored in the bay. On the aft deck, Clara sat wearing a white linen sundress, her feet tucked under her. Alistair Vance walked out from the cabin carrying 2 glasses of vintage rosé. He looked relaxed, the tension of New York miles away. "My team tells me the eviction notice was served," Alistair said, handing her a glass. "And Senator Holloway has publicly denounced him." Clara took the glass, looking at the amber liquid. She didn't smile. Her face was calm, almost sad. "He'll try to fight it," Clara said. "Marcus is a cornered animal now. He'll try to leverage the social connections he thinks he has." "He has no connections, Clara," Alistair reminded her, sitting opposite her. "You were the connection. You were the one who remembered the birthdays, who sent the gifts, who covered up the affairs so the wives of his investors wouldn't turn on him. Without you, he's just a man in an empty suit." Clara took a sip. "There's one thing left. The gala." Alistair nodded slowly. "The Met Gala next week. He's a co-chair. He has to be there." "And he's planning to auction off the sterling diamond," Clara said, "to raise capital to save the company." "The diamond he gave you." "The one he took back," Clara corrected. "He thinks it's worth $5 million. It's the only asset he has left that isn't frozen." Alistair leaned forward, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I assume you have a plan for that." Clara finally smiled. It was a dangerous smile. "The diamond is fake, Alistair. I sold the real one 5 years ago to pay off his gambling debt in Macau so the triads wouldn't break his legs. I replaced it with a cubic zirconia replica." Alistair burst out laughing. "He's going to try to auction a piece of glass to the wealthiest people in New York." "And I," Clara said, standing up and walking to the railing to look out at the sea, "am going to be in the front row when the appraiser puts his loop to it." "Then we go back to New York," Alistair said, standing beside her. "Yes," Clara whispered. "One last dance." New York City during Met Gala week is a battlefield of silk diamonds and egos. But for Marcus Sterling, it was a fight for survival. The morning of the gala, Marcus sat in a suite at the Pierre Hotel. He couldn't go home because the locks at his penthouse had been changed by the new management, Vance Global. His credit cards were still frozen. He had to pawn his platinum Daytona watch just to pay for the suite and the tuxedo rental. "It doesn't matter," Marcus muttered to himself, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. He looked gaunt. The stress of the last 48 hours had carved deep lines into his face. "Tonight I sell the diamond. 5 million conservative, maybe 10 with the right bidding war. I take the cash, I flee to non-extradition soil, and I rebuild." Isabella was sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone. She hadn't left him yet, but only because she didn't believe he was truly broke. Men like Marcus Sterling didn't go broke. They just had liquidity issues. "Are we going?" she snapped. "The red carpet opened 20 minutes ago. I'm not walking in when the B-listers arrive. "We are going," Marcus said, grabbing the velvet box from the safe. He opened it. The sterling diamond, a 50-carat emerald-cut behemoth, glittered under the hotel lights. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. It looked like salvation. He snapped the box shut. "Let's go." The red carpet. The steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art were a sea of flashing bulbs. The theme was Gilded Age Resurrection, a cruel irony Marcus failed to appreciate. When Marcus's limousine, a rental, pulled up, he stepped out expecting the usual roar of "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Sterling." Instead, the photographers were distracted. A hush had fallen over the crowd, followed by a frantic, chaotic eruption of camera shutters that sounded like machine gun fire. "Who is it?" Isabella asked, craning her neck, annoyed that the lenses weren't pointed at her. A black Bugatti La Voiture Noire, a car so rare it was practically a myth, had idled at the base of the stairs. The door opened. First came Alistair Vance. He looked like a modern-day king in a midnight blue tuxedo with lapels that seemed to absorb the light. The crowd gasped. Alistair Vance hadn't attended a public gala in 15 years. But then he turned and offered his hand to the passenger. Clara emerged. The air left Marcus's lungs. Gone was the beige trench coat. Gone was the invisible wife. Clara was wearing a gown of liquid silver that clung to her silhouette like armor. It was backless, daring, and regal. Around her neck she wore no diamonds, just a simple thin black ribbon with a single antique silver key hanging from it. She looked dangerous. She looked free. "Is that Clara?" a reporter shouted. "Mrs. Sterling!" another yelled. Clara stopped on the second step. She looked directly at the camera bank. Then her eyes drifted, locking onto Marcus, who was frozen 10 feet away. She didn't wave. She didn't scowl. She simply tilted her head, acknowledging him the way a human acknowledges a bug on the sidewalk, and then turned to Alistair. Alistair placed a hand on the small of her back, and they ascended the stairs, the crowd parting for them like the Red Sea. "She looks incredible," Isabella whispered, betraying herself. Marcus grabbed Isabella's arm hard enough to bruise. "She looks like a whore bought by a billionaire," he hissed through his voice shook. "Come on, we have a diamond to sell." The ballroom. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Marcus worked the room, but the reception was frosty. People he had known for decades suddenly found their drinks very interesting when he approached. They had heard the rumors, the eviction, the frozen accounts, the investigation. He needed to get to the auction. The charity auction was the highlight of the night. Marcus had pulled strings to get the sterling diamond listed as the finale item, with proceeds ostensibly going to the arts, though the fine print directed 90% of the sale to the donor Marcus. He found his seat at table 14, a bad table near the kitchen. Clara and Alistair were at table 1 center stage, seated next to the mayor and the editor-in-chief of Vogue. "Why is he with her?" Marcus obsessively whispered to Isabella. "He's a recluse. He hates people." "Why, Clara?" Isabella had had enough. "Maybe because she listens." "You haven't asked me a single question about my life in 3 years, Marcus." "Not now, Isabella." The lights dimmed. The auctioneer, a British man with a booming voice, took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we come to our final lot. Generously donated by Mr. Marcus Sterling, the sterling diamond." A spotlight hit the rotating pedestal on stage. The diamond sparkled violently. "Bidding starts at $2 million. $2 million? A voice cried out. 3, 4 million. Marcus felt his heart restart. It was working. Greed was overriding the rumors. People wanted the rock. 5 million, came a voice from the front. The room went silent. It was Alistair Vance. He hadn't turned around. He just raised his paddle. "I have 5 million from Mr. Vance," the auctioneer stammered. "Do I hear 6? Marcus sweated. If Alistair bought it, it would be sweet irony. He would take Alistair's money and use it to destroy him. 6 million. Marcus signaled a plant in the audience, an old business associate he had promised a cut to. He needed to drive the price up. 10 million, Alistair said calmly. Gasps filled the room. Marcus gripped the table. 10 million. That was enough to fix everything. He could restart in London. He could disappear. 10 million going once? 15 million? Clara's voice cut through the room. Marcus stood up halfway. She was bidding, with what money? His money. Clara, what are you doing? Alistair asked quietly, low enough that only she could hear. Driving the nail in, she whispered. 15 million from the lady in silver, the auctioneer said, sweating now. 20 million, Alistair countered his own partner. The room was electric. It was a lover's quarrel played out in millions. Sold. The auctioneer slammed the gavel before anyone else could breathe. To Mr. Alistair Vance for $20 million. The room erupted in applause. Marcus slumped back in his chair, euphoric. 20 million. He had won. He had actually won. He looked at Isabella, grinning like a skull. I told you. I'm untouchable. But Alistair Vance was standing up. He walked up to the stage, taking the microphone from the stunned auctioneer. Thank you, Alistair said. His voice filled the cavernous hall. However, given the questionable financial reputation of the donor recently reported in the press, I must insist on an immediate authentication before the transfer of funds. Marcus froze. What? It's authenticated. I have the papers. Papers can be forged, Alistair said smoothly. I happen to have brought one of the world's leading gemologists with me as a guest, Mr. Holloway. A small man with thick glasses stood up from table 1. He walked onto the stage, pulling a loop and a thermal conductivity tester from his pocket. This is an outrage, Marcus screamed, standing up. You're trying to humiliate me. If it's real, Marcus, you have nothing to fear. Clara spoke up. She remained seated, turning her chair to face him. Her voice was calm, amplified by the silence of the room. Let the man test the stone. Marcus looked at the diamond. He had bought it 10 years ago. He had kept it in a safe. He had never touched it. It had to be real. The gemologist touched the probe to the stone. Beep. The room waited. The gemologist frowned. He breathed on the stone. He looked through his loop. Then he looked at Alistair, then at the audience. This is not a diamond, the gemologist announced. It is high-grade cubic zirconia. Value approximately $200. The silence was shattered by a singular horrified gasp from the crowd, followed by the roar of laughter and shock. Marcus stood there, his world spinning. That's a lie. She switched it. She stole the real one. He pointed a shaking finger at Clara. Clara stood up slowly. She walked toward him, meeting him in the middle of the room under the chandeliers. I didn't steal it, Marcus, she said, her voice clear. I sold it. You... What? 5 years ago, Clara said. You were in Macau. You bet the company accounts on a baccarat hand. You lost. The triads were going to kill you. You called me crying, begging me to fix it. You don't remember. I fixed that myself. I got a loan. You couldn't get a loan, Clara said, pity in her eyes. No one would lend to you. I took the diamond to a fence in Hong Kong. I sold it for $4 million. I wired the money to the casino. I saved your life, Marcus. And I replaced the stone with a fake because I knew that you only cared about how things looked, not what they were worth. You never looked at it closely, just like you never looked at me. The room was dead silent. The humiliation was absolute. Marcus Sterling hadn't just tried to sell a fake diamond. He had been exposed as a man whose life was saved by the wife he discarded, a man so oblivious he didn't know his own fortune was paste. Marcus fell back into his chair. Isabella stood up. I think I'm going to go, she said quietly. She grabbed her clutch and walked away, not looking back. Marcus was alone. The aftermath of the Met Gala wasn't a scandal, it was an autopsy. By the next morning, the video of the zirconia reveal had 50 million views. The meme of Marcus's face when the gemologist spoke was everywhere. But for Clara, the victory felt hollow. She sat in the library of Alistair's townhouse on the Upper East Side. It was a sanctuary of books and firelight. Alistair entered carrying a tray with tea. "The district attorney just called," Alistair said. "They're charging Marcus with attempted fraud for the auction on top of the environmental charges." Clara nodded, staring at the fire. "It's over." "Not quite," Alistair said. He sat down across from her. "He's still fighting. He's suing you for the theft of the original diamond. He's claiming you acted without his authority. He has no proof. He doesn't need proof to drag you through the mud, Clara. He's desperate." Alistair paused. "It's time you told me the rest." Clara looked up. "The rest? You and I. We have a partnership," Alistair said carefully. "I helped you because of who your father was. Because Arthur Thorne was the only man in this city who treated me with kindness when I was a penniless immigrant janitor at the university." This was the truth Alistair held. Clara's father, Arthur, wasn't just a nobody. He was a brilliant economics professor who died in obscurity because his ideas were stolen by his department head. Alistair had been the janitor who cleaned Arthur's chalkboard. Arthur had taught Alistair English economics and honor. When Arthur died, Alistair vowed to watch over his daughter. "I know you helped me because of Dad," Clara said. "But there's something I haven't told you about Marcus." "What?" "Marcus didn't just steal my ideas," Clara said, her voice trembling. "He stole the Black Book." Alistair froze. "Arthur's Black Book." "The notebook your father claimed contained the algorithm for perfect market prediction. I thought it was a myth. I thought it was lost in the fire that killed him." "It wasn't lost," Clara whispered. "I saved it. I was 18. I didn't understand the math then. When I met Marcus, I showed it to him. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he could decode it." Clara stood up, pacing the room. "He couldn't decode it. He's not smart enough. But he used parts of it, the parts I explained to him, to build Sterling and Partners. That's why the company worked. That's why he needed me. I was the translator for the book." "And where is the book now?" Alistair asked, his voice intense. "That's the problem," Clara said. "I don't have it." Alistair's eyes widened. "When I left," Clara said, "I emptied the safe. I took the cash, the deeds, the jewelry. But the book wasn't there. Marcus moved it." "If he has that book," Alistair said darkly, "and he finds someone else to translate it, someone unscrupulous, he could destabilize the entire market. He could do billions in damage just to save himself." "He won't hire someone else," Clara said. "He's too paranoid. He'll try to use it himself. And that's the danger, the algorithm. It has a fail-safe my father wrote in. If you use the variables incorrectly, it doesn't just predict a crash. It causes one." Alistair stood up abruptly. "We have to find him. Now." Marcus's last stand. Marcus was not in a hotel anymore. He was in the only place he had left, an old derelict warehouse in the meatpacking district that he had bought years ago under a fake name to store illegal ivory imports, another skeleton in his closet. He sat at a rusted metal table. The only light came from a construction lamp. In front of him lay a tattered leather-bound notebook. The Black Book. He had moved it weeks ago, sensing Clara was pulling away. He knew this was the source of her power, even if he didn't understand the math. X equals the delta of the fear index. Marcus muttered, his eyes bloodshot. He was typing furiously into a laptop tethered to a satellite uplink he had bought on the black market. He was locked out of the banking system, but he still had access to the dark pool and unregulated trading exchange used by criminals in desperate states. "If I can't own the market," Marcus hissed, "I'll break it. I'll short the entire housing sector, trigger a collapse, and walk away with the volatility profit." He didn't understand the warnings in the margins of the book. He didn't read the note Clara's father had written in red ink, "Do not invert the variable without a stabilizer." Marcus typed in the code. He was about to execute a trade leveraging assets he didn't have, using the algorithm to trick the system into believing he had trillions in liquidity. "Die, Clara," he whispered. "Die, Alistair. You want to ruin me, I'll take the whole world down with me." His finger hovered over the enter key. Suddenly, the heavy iron door of the warehouse groaned. Marcus spun around, pulling a small revolver from his jacket pocket. He was past sanity now. "Who's there?" A silhouette stood in the doorway, framed by the rain outside. "Put the laptop down, Marcus," Clara said. She stepped into the light. She was alone. Or so it seemed. "You," Marcus sneered. "You came to gloat." "I came to stop you from triggering a global recession," Clara said calmly. "You don't know what you're doing. That formula isn't a weapon. It's a balance scale. If you force it, it snaps back." "You think you're so smart," Marcus laughed, waving the gun. "You and your janitor father. Yes, I knew. I looked him up after you left. Arthur Thorne, the crazy professor." "He wasn't crazy," Clara said, stepping closer. "He was afraid. He was afraid of men like you." "Stay back." Marcus cocked the gun. "I'm pressing this key. I'm going to short the grid. I'll be a billionaire by sunrise and you'll be dust." "Marcus, look at the laptop," Clara said softly. "Don't try to trick me." "Look at the battery, Marcus." Marcus glanced at the screen. The battery icon was flashing red, but more importantly, the signal bar was dead. "What?" He frantically tapped the keys. "No connection." "How?" Marcus screamed. "Alistair owns the satellite company you're trying to use," Clara said. "We cut the feed 2 minutes ago." Marcus stared at the screen. The trade had failed. He had nothing. The book was useless without the connection. The gun was heavy in his hand. "It's over," Clara said. "The police are outside. Alistair is with them. Put the gun down." Marcus looked at the gun. He looked at Clara. He looked at the black book. For a second, Clara thought he might turn the gun on himself. The despair in his eyes was bottomless. But Marcus Sterling was a coward to the end. He dropped the gun. It clattered on the concrete. "It wasn't my fault," he sobbed, sinking to his knees. "The market, the pressure. You didn't support me enough, Clara. You made me do this." Clara walked over. She didn't look at him. She reached past him and picked up the leather notebook. She dusted it off gently. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. She walked out into the rain as the SWAT team swarmed in. She didn't look back as they cuffed him, listening to his screams of how he was the victim, how he was the genius, how everyone had betrayed him. Clara climbed into the back of the Rolls-Royce where Alistair was waiting. "Did you get it?" he asked. She held up the book. "Is he—" "He's alive," Clara said. "He'll go to prison for a very long time, but he's alive." Alistair signaled the driver. "Where to?" Clara looked at the book in her lap. "There's one last thing to do. The final twist." "What twist?" Alistair asked. "The one my father planned 20 years ago," Clara said, opening the book to the very last page. "The entry I never showed Marcus." She pointed to a set of coordinates and a bank account number. "Marcus didn't just build his company on stolen ideas," Clara said. "He built it on a trap. My father knew someone would steal this. He built a poison pill into the financial structure of any company that used these formulas." "What does that mean?" "It means—" Clara smiled, and for the first time she looked truly at peace. "It means that technically Sterling and Partners has legally belonged to the Arthur Thorne estate since the moment Marcus made his first $1 million. He never owned it. He was just working for me the whole time." Alistair laughed, a sound of pure incredulity. "You own it all." "I own it all," Clara said. "And tomorrow I'm going to dissolve it and give every cent to the people he cheated." The car drove off into the New York night, leaving the wreckage of Marcus Sterling in the rearview mirror. The sentencing of Marcus Sterling was the televised event of the year. The man who had once claimed to own the skyline was reduced to inmate 7840, standing before the judge in a bright orange jumpsuit. He scanned the courtroom for allies, His lawyer had been disbarred. His mistress had fled to Paris and found only Clara sitting in the back row. 25 years, the judge declared. Marcus screamed a raw sound of disbelief as bailiffs dragged him away. He wasn't screaming for mercy. He was screaming because he realized the world had finally stopped listening to him. 3 months later, Clara visited him at the Otisville Correctional Facility. Behind the plexiglass, Marcus looked hollow, stripped of his expensive suits and arrogance. "Clara," he whispered into the phone receiver. "You have the assets. Use the money to get me an appeal. If you get me out, I'll let you be CEO. We can rebuild." Clara leaned forward, her expression calm. "There is no company, Marcus. I dissolved Sterling and Partners the morning after your sentencing." Marcus froze. "You... what?" "I sold the buildings. I liquidated the accounts," Clara explained ruthlessly. "And I didn't keep a dime. I set up a restitution fund. Every contractor you stiffed, every family you evicted, every investor you defrauded, they all received a check last week. Full reimbursement. You gave it away." Marcus wept, slamming his fist against the glass. "My legacy. You burned it." "I fixed it," Clara corrected, standing up. "You are debt-free, Marcus. You have nothing, but you owe nothing. That is my final gift to you." She hung up the phone, walking away as he screamed silently behind the soundproof glass. Outside, the rain had cleared. Alistair was waiting by the Rolls-Royce, looking relaxed in a cashmere sweater. "Is it done?" he asked. "It's quiet," Clara replied, feeling a weight vanish from her shoulders. "My pilot is on standby for London," Alistair said. "Or there is a vineyard in Tuscany that's been mismanaging its soil for years. I was thinking we could go fix it." Clara smiled, the first true smile of her freedom. "Forget London. Let's go to Italy." She stepped into the car, leaving the wreckage of her past in the rearview mirror, finally ready to live a life that was entirely her own. 5 years later, the site of the former Sterling Tower was now the Arthur Thorne Memorial Park, a lush green sanctuary in the middle of Manhattan. Clara sat on a bench watching a university student struggle with a complex economics equation. "You're forgetting the chaos variable," Clara said softly, leaning over to correct the girl's math. "Panic always squares the result." The student looked up, eyes wide. You're Clara Vance, the woman who destroyed the Sterling Empire." "I just corrected a rounding error." Clara smiled. Alistair approached, looking younger and happier than he ever had in the boardrooms. He carried a sleeping toddler in one arm and 2 ice cream cones in the other. "Ready, my love?" Alistair asked. "The Prime Minister is waiting. He says only the Thorne algorithm can fix the London housing market." As they walked toward the waiting helicopter, a news alert flashed on the student's phone. "Disgraced mogul. Marcus Sterling found deceased in prison cell. Cause heart failure." Below it, a viral financial report trended. Documents reveal Alistair Vance transferred 51% of his company to Clara on their wedding day. Quote, "She was the billionaire all along. I was just the bank." The student watched them ascend. Clara hadn't just ridden away in a billionaire's limo that rainy night. She had been driving the car the whole time. And that is the story of Clara and Marcus. She gave him 10 years of silence, and when she finally spoke, she brought down an empire without raising her voice. It makes you wonder how many Claras are out there right now, quietly holding up the success of someone who doesn't appreciate them. And what would happen if they decided to just walk away? What do you think? Was Clara's revenge too harsh, or did Marcus get exactly what he deserved? And would you have given the money back, or kept the $1 billion for yourself? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice, revenge, and secret brilliance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story about a cheating husband who realized too late that his wife was his boss. Thanks for watching, and remember, silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's just reloading.